Good afternoon and welcome. Okay, so today we're going to go back a little bit because I've started grading the estates assignment that you guys submitted last week, and um, it's pretty rough. It's not great. Um, and so I want to walk through some of the sort of common errors that I'm seeing. And these are not, these may not apply to you. They may not be things that you did, but these are just things that I've noticed that sort of um, have left me a little baffled because I thought these were things that had been explained. So I'm going to walk through this stuff. Then we're going to talk about what's next, and then if you guys have questions, we will take those questions, and then we'll wrap up. So you guys are my 5th of 5 tutorials today. So if ever you wonder why I'm a little punch drunk by the time I get to your tutorial, that is why. But anyway, couple of tutorials have gone almost to the full time. Couple have ended early. We're gonna see where this takes us. Okay. So I've got a list of things that I have noticed as I continue to grade over the course of the week. I'm going to add to it. And then at the end of the week, when I finish grading, I will post this common errors to the website, to e-learning. So while you guys should feel free to take notes, if you miss something or you're confused about something, you should feel free to wait until you see the document to see if you can if that answers your questions. Okay. So these are not in any particular order. They are just as I notice things, I make a note of them. And again, it may be possible that none of these apply to you. But the first thing that I noticed is a lot of students want to call things a fee tail. So I'm just going to go ahead and tell you that the fee tail should not appear anywhere in the answer to this assignment. It's not, none of these conveyances create a fee tail, ever. Yeah, so that. And we're going to talk a little bit more about the fee tail later today, but this is the starting point, right? Is that at no point is the fee tail the correct answer in this assignment. The next thing that I notice is I think there's some confusion over the difference between children and heirs. And specifically, right, just because someone has children doesn't mean that those children are their heirs. And just because someone doesn't have kids doesn't mean that they'll die without heirs. So if you see a conveyance to someone's heirs, you have to keep in mind that that is a set that is not yet determined. Okay, so it's not like we don't know who the heirs are yet, but it's possible that the heirs will be determined before that future interest vests. Okay, so that's the question that you have to ask yourself is, what are the circumstances under which we can determine who the heirs are, and what are the circumstances where we can't. Okay. So next, and boy, this is the one that just absolutely just leaves me flabbergasted every time I see it. A lot of you guys really, really want to give me all the information that you have about this. Like, you tell me that this conveyance creates a life estate, and then you tell me all the rights that life estate holders have and the limitations on life estate holders' rights and the cases that give rise to those limitations. And I'm just sitting here going, none of this matters. You have been asked to describe the interests created, to tell me this conveyance creates this interest. What that means in the broader strokes of things, not what you are being asked to do, not responsive to the call of the question. So every time you send me one of these answers, I have to sit there and parse through it and read it very carefully to make sure that you don't have buried in it somewhere the right answer, because I want to make sure that you get credit for your right answers. And so, you know, you're doing a lot more work than is necessary for the assignment. And then you're also putting a lot more work on me that slows down the grading and makes it so that you don't get meaningful feedback as quickly. So, like, you're screwing yourselves over two different ways and also screwing me over along the way. And I'd appreciate it if we could agree not to do that anymore. So let me show you again how I want you to answer these types of questions, right? So we have a conveyance, and the conveyance creates a present possessory interest that belongs to a holder. And then if there's some sort of defeasible condition attached to the possessory interest, there's a future interest that belongs to a holder. And when that future interest vests, it will create a possessory interest. And if there are conditions attached whereby the future interest doesn't come into existence until a condition is triggered, then that needs to also be in your description. So here's the format in the chat, right? We describe the possessory interest as a possessory interest to a holder. We describe the future interest as the future interest to the holder in the possessory interest, and then attached on any conditions if there are any. Okay. But this brings me to another issue that I'm seeing in a lot of answers, which is that future interests are contingent, have two potential contingencies in them. Okay. And a lot of students are mixing them up, conflating them, forgetting one or both of them. And so I just want to be clear that the future interest first has to come into existence. And then once it comes into existence, it has to vest. Okay, so let me walk you through the timeline, right? We have a possessory interest And that possessory interest, by coming into existence with a condition, with a terminating condition, it creates a future interest. And then when that possessory interest dies, the future interest vests, which creates a new possessory interest. And then the cycle continues, right? The possessory interest, the new possessory interest creates a new future interest, and so on, and so on, and so on. So there is one possessory interest and one future interest at a time. Never more than that. So if you say to me, okay, if you say to me, Agnes has a life estate and Bob has a fee simple determinable, no, that is two present interests. You need one possessory, one present, one future. Okay? Which brings me to my next point, which is that there still seems to be a confusion for some students on what constitutes a possessory interest versus a future interest. So let's go through that. There are five possessory interests. If we were American, I would make a Sesame Street joke now, but you guys, I hope you guys had Sesame Street. If you didn't, you're the poorer for it. So five possessory interests: the fee simple absolute, the life estate, the two types of defeasible fees. Two types of defeasible fees. There's the fee simple determinable, which ends when an event occurs. And there is the fee simple subject to condition subsequent, which ends when a condition ceases to be true. And then the last possessory interest is the fee tail, more of which about later. Okay. Then we have four future interests. We have the reversion, the remainder, the possibility of reverter, and the right of re-entry. Four future interests. So what is the relationship between these two? So one thing that we have to remember is that possessory interests define the future interest that comes after them. And that means that you have to read the conveyance in the order it is written. You can't skip around. You can't delete words, okay? There are specific circumstances where part of the conveyance falls away, but those specific circumstances don't like lift words out of the middle, they lop things off the end, okay? So if the possessory interest is a fee simple absolute or a fee tail, there is no future interest, right? Those do not create future interests because they provide for possession until the end of time, okay? If the possessory interest is a life estate, the future interest that is created must be either a reversion or a remainder. So if you say to me that Albert has a life estate and Betty has a possibility of reverter, no, okay? The reversion goes back to the original grantor and a remainder goes to a third party, okay? So that's the difference. If the possessory interest is a fee simple determinable, if it's a fee simple determinable, the future interest must be the possibility of reverter. So if you say to me that Andrew has a fee simple determinable and Bonnie has a reversion, no, that is incorrect. Okay? Must be a possibility of reverter. When that possibility of reverter vests, it will create some possessory interest. Again, go back to the list of 5 possessory interests. If the possessory interest is a fee simple subject to condition subsequent, the next future interest must be the right of re-entry. Okay, nothing else, only the right of re-entry. Okay. Now, let's talk about fee tail. Now, those of you who mentioned fee tail all know what it is, right? It is a conveyance that limits the ability of the present holder to convey except to their lineal descendants, right? They can only convey it to their lineal descendants. It's abolished in a lot of jurisdictions, but not all. But even in the places where it exists, it is disfavored, which means that we do not create a fee tail unless it is precisely demanded. There are 3 ways to create a fee tail, 3 languages that when we read it in a conveyance, we go, that's a fee tail. I'm going to give that language to you right now. So the first and most common form of fee tail is to say to A and the heirs of his body. Okay, so of his body is the key piece there. One second, Abigail, let me finish this and then I'll hear from you. Okay. Heirs of his body, not to A and his heirs. Okay, and his heirs is just a signal that it's a fee simple. Okay. The second way is to say to A and his heirs begotten of a spouse's name, right? Betty, Barbara, Bonnie, whatever, right? And the purpose of this is to specifically limit it to heirs of a particular marriage. So not heirs from a prior marriage, not heirs from a subsequent marriage, this marriage. Got it, no worries. Okay. And the last way to create a fee tail is just to say it, right? If you say to A in fee tail, then the courts will go, sure, that is clearly an intent to create a fee tail. We'll allow it, right? Okay. So we are now, in case you were wondering, 2/3 of the way through my list. So making good time. The next thing is that a lot of folks seemed to think that 2A for life created a fee simple absolute. And it's simply like, to do that wipes away the words for life. Okay. And, there are jurisdictions in the Caribbean where the default is a life estate. And so we say, and so 2A constitutes a life estate. Whereas in most jurisdictions, 2A passes a fee simple. But there is nowhere, at least not that I'm aware of, where 2A for life conveys fee simple rather than a life estate. Okay. Next thing, lot of students are missing what I call the shadow grant. Okay, and don't go looking for that term. That's not in any of the texts. It's not anywhere online. That's my term that I came up with to try and illustrate this. The shadow grant is the future interest that is retained by the original grantor when um, when they fail to convey fee simple absolute in a conveyance. Okay, so here's the trick. Here's the trick. If when you look at the conveyance, when you read through the conveyance, there is a set of events that if they all happen, no one who is named in the conveyance takes fee simple absolute, then you are missing a shadow grant retained by the original grantor. Okay. If you can go, okay, if A, B, and C happen, no matter how unlikely they are, if they all happen, then nobody named in this conveyance is entitled to fee simple absolute, then the original grantor has to have a future interest that is fee simple absolute. Okay. Two more things, and then we will talk about what comes next. Couple of folks have said that some of the conditional grants in the assignment are void for uncertainty. And let me explain why that's incorrect. The first issue is that these folks are referring to a 1943 House of Lords case. The first issue is that under the doctrine of uncertainty as it is expressed by the Lords in that case, none of the conveyances in the assignment meet that standard. The second issue is that I'm pretty sure the Lords incorrectly applied the standard in the case that the folks are referring to. Let me explain why. Okay. The standard for uncertainty is that the question that we have to ask in defeating the fee has to be unanswerable. Okay. Uncertainty came up in tutorials a couple of times a couple of weeks ago, and the example I gave for students was an uncertain condition would be 2A so long as they're a good person. Well, how do we know if they're a good person? What's the standard? You know, how do we answer the question of whether the fee has been defeated? We can't, and so that condition would be void for uncertainty. Okay. In the case that these students are referring to, the Lord's case, and before you ask, I do not remember the name, but I will look it up and make sure that you guys have it. But in this case, the bequest was 2A so long as they marry a man of Jewish parentage and of the Jewish faith. Okay. And the Lords go, well, what does it mean to be of Jewish parentage? Does that mean one parent or two parents or like what? We don't know. We can't tell. And it seems to me that that is blatantly wrong and also anti-Semitic, because if you ask any Jew, they will tell you exactly what it means to be of Jewish parentage in great detail. with much reference to authorities much older than the House of Lords. Um, so, uh, right. So, so, you know, I don't think that uh, that the case correctly applies the doctrine, but it absolutely correctly states it, which is that uncertainty is when we don't know if the condition, we can't know if the condition has been met. Okay? The last thing that I want to talk about is there's a lot of folks who are telling me that property goes back to the state or the crown. And this is a process known as escheat. I'm going to put it in the chat because it is spelled nothing like it sounds. So escheat is when there are no heirs, and so property reverts to the state or to the crown. As I keep saying, this is not a decedent's estates class, and so I am not prepared to comment on Caribbean inheritance law. But in the places where I'm familiar, escheat is incredibly rare. Like you can go your whole career as an estates attorney and you might have one or two cases where escheat becomes an issue, right? Where the state might come in and claim some of the property. Might be more likely if you're representing relatively poor people, but that's uh, a whole different issue. Okay, but the piece of this puzzle, right? The reason why I think folks are sort of turning to escheat as a mechanism is they're forgetting the shadow grant, or they're getting confused about the difference between children and heirs. And I think that if you keep those two things in mind, there will never be a situation where you think that escheat is necessary. Okay? So this is what I've gotten from the stuff that I've graded so far. What I'm going to do is, as I continue to grade, I'm going to add things to this list and continue to expand the list to sort of cover the common errors that I see. And then I'm going to upload this to e-learning. I'm also going to I'm also going to add to e-learning, once I add the common errors, I'm going to add another assignment where you guys are going to re-answer these questions, having taken this into account. So you're going to get another bite at the apple, because I think that, if the goal is to measure your learning, then one of the things that we should be doing is actually giving you an opportunity to learn. So we're gonna take that out into the wild, and that's where things are gonna go. Okay. What questions do you guys have? So the answer to that is yes, but don't worry about it. Like, so this is part of why you're going to get another bite at the apple. And also, like, this is not going to be a massive part of your grade. So again, like, these scores are not great, that you're not going to be pleased with them. But they're not, if if this is what keeps you from passing the class, you're already in a much bigger world of hurt. Because remember, the final exam is 80% of your grade. So, you've already sort of given the game away before you even step on the field if this is the thing that keeps you from passing the class. So, okay, what other questions? I don't know if that answers your question, Debbie, but the big thing, the big thing is, yes, yes, it counts, but I wouldn't panic. What other questions are there? Going once? Going twice? Okay, well, okay, great, awesome, wonderful. Okay, then we will see you guys tomorrow. Take care, and bye. So, thanks so much.